Hello and welcome to this latest video. As we near the massively overhyped festival of Halloween, I thought it was high time that we visited the amazing wealth of folklore that we have in Glamorgan around witches, because right here we've got some absolute belters that I'd like to share with you.
So let's begin with a rather unique character in our folklore, and arguably the most famous of them all, the Mastor Nor. Now, we can't be certain if witch is a great description of what she is, but she is described in some texts as a witch, in others as a ghostly apparition, but she's quite unique to the counties of South Wales. She filled the hearts of all who saw her with fear, as she was known to strike down and kill those who crossed her path. She also has quite a backstory, believed to be the ghost of Robert Fitzhamond's beautiful but cruel mistress, to whom he gave lands in Glamorgan. She was known to be a great horsewoman who loved nothing more than riding to hounds, and on one particularly exhilarating hunt she quipped, "If I cannot hunt in heaven, then I would rather not go there." She kept up the hunting until the day she died. But when she faced St. Peter at the gates of heaven, her wicked soul was refused entry. Instead, she was given a pack of spirit hounds, the Cwn Annwn, or demon dogs, to ride with for all eternity in a terrifying ghostly hunting party that charged across the still winter night skies. There is a superstition in Glamorgan that if you ever see Mastor Nor, then I'm afraid your days are numbered. Which makes her quite similar to another creature in Glamorgan folklore who, like Mastor Nor, is a bit witchy, but also a bit unique, and that is the Gwrach Arben. Now, this phenomenon pops up all over Welsh folklore. She isn't quite a witch, she isn't quite a ghost, she's somewhere in the middle, very similar to the Irish tradition of the Banshee. Known as Gurak Arben, she is described by many sources across the century. One book, a particular favourite of mine, British Goblins, published in 1880. This is what this has to say as a description. A monstrous Welsh spirit in the shape of a hideously ugly woman, whose appearance is typically with unkempt hair and wizened, withered arms, with leathery wings, long black teeth, and a pale corpse-like feature. She approaches the window of a person about to die by night and calls their name or travels invisibly beside them and utters her cry when they approach a stream or crossroads. She is sometimes depicted as washing her hands there. Marie Trevelyan researched the phenomenon in 1909 and speaking to people across the Vale of Glamorgan who told her that the Gwrach Arben's choice of victims had a pattern. "This night hag never troubles new families," she writes. "Only those whose ancestors have long generations lived in the same place. In other words, old stock. But dig a little deeper, and you find that legends of the Gwrach Arben are much more varied and complex than simple portents of doom."
We have quite a celebrated story of a Gwrach Arben at St. Donat's Castle, and we have Marie Trevelyan to thank for that, because in her book of Folklore and Folk Tales of Wales, she wrote an encounter about an overnight guest who stayed in St. Donat's Castle in the early 19th century, and this is what she wrote. "On his first night, the guest heard a moaning and wailing sound coming from close under his window. He described it as sounding like a woman in the greatest of agony. He went to the window to look out and see what the cause was. When he got there, he was immediately alarmed by the sound of flapping wings against the lattice and a rattling noise like the clatter of talons against the glass. In the morning, he told his hosts about the disturbance, and they informed him that it was the Gwrach Arben, who always frequenting the castle, lamenting the death of the last of the Stradlings in the direct line. They said that sometimes this mysterious figure wandered through the empty and silent rooms of the disused part of the castle, and the sounds of her lamentations were enough to turn one's blood to ice. Now, there are further accounts of this St. Donat spectre, described as flying in the twilight of a November evening, traversing the whole village from one end to the other. Her robes and outstretched arms flowed against the wind, causing a great roaring noise. She was also once seen beating the boundaries of the whole estate, accompanied by black spirits, the red eyes of drooling fangs on the Cwn Annwn. We have another tale of a Gwrach Arben, only a few miles away from St. Donat's, at Plas Llanmihangel. A gorgeous manor house, most of which is Tudor, but parts of it date back to the 12th century, including a dungeon. Now, one of the people who lived at this house was a lady by the name of Eleanor Thomas, and we're not altogether sure why, but the servants of the house and the people of the village became convinced that she was a witch, hence her nickname Eleanor Ddu, Welsh for Black Eleanor. They were absolutely terrified of her, but she was to meet quite a tragic end. One day, when she was out bathing in the lake in front of the house, she tragically drowned and was lost. Much to the relief of the locals, until 30 years later, when the house had been sold by the incumbent family, when her spectre was seen taking the form of a Gwrach Arben, rising out of the lake, pointing at the house. Fun fact, the person who just bought and moved into the house was a chap by the name of Humphrey Edwin, who went on to become Lord Mayor of London.
Now, it might be quite easy to dismiss these stories as the ramblings of superstitious country folk with no formal education, but balance that against this last one. A chap by the name of William Wirt Sykes worked as a journalist at the American consulate in Cardiff in the latter part of the 19th century, so hardly uneducated. All the same, William wrote a story about a man in Llandaff who was awoken at midnight by a terrible screeching sound. He ran to his window and looked out across the River Taff, where he saw the unmistakable spectre of the Gwrach Arben rise out of the river and float through the door of the Cow and Snuffers pub, these days an apartment block. He waited a while, but she did not return. The following morning the news reached him. Llewellyn, the landlord of the Cow and Snuffers, had died during the night.
Now, none of these characters, to my mind, fully conforms to what we might think of as being a witch, which leads me to conclude perhaps we need a bit of a definition. So I've asked an expert.
Hello everyone, I am Nikki, also known as the Liminal Witch, and I practice hedge witchcraft, liminal witchcraft and non-traditional witchcraft, and I've been practicing for about 10 years roughly, almost on the dot. And although I don't practice traditionally, I work very close with nature, magic, energy, and it's just something that I've always been really passionate about, something that's made me feel like I belong in the world, somewhere that just feels right for me. So yeah, that's what I would say.
What actually is a witch?
A witch is someone who works with nature and the manipulation of energy. That is the simplest way I can put it. Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, I'll give you the dictionary definition and you tell me if you recognise anything in here. So according to the Oxford English Dictionary, a witch is defined as a person, usually a woman, who professes or is supposed to practice magic or sorcery, or is a sorceress. And the other alternative definition they've got is a woman is supposed to have evil or wicked magical powers. Now, that's quite different from your definition.
Yeah, just a bit.
So the wicked magical, the evil or wicked magical powers, there's a thing. Where does that come from? Why do we think that witches are evil?
I think that it really boils down to archaic Christian beliefs and traditions because, back in the medieval times and all of that, it was very much Christianity is right and everything that opposes it or goes off from that is very wrong. And I think it all really just boils down to that on a base level. It's all about control and church politics.
So are you saying that the word witch is like a form of denigration used by the church to
Yes, I would say it is, yes, but it's supposed to be a term of like an empowering term. It's meant to be something that describes a powerful, independent woman, although men can be witches too, because men were also called witches before the witch trials. It's just after the witch trials it became a bad word, so to speak.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like it's evolved really. And people still now, if you say that you're a witch or you say anything to do with witchcraft, they'll look at you like crazy.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
I can kind of see that. When you gave your introduction, you described yourself as a hedge witch, is that right?
Yeah.
So how many different kinds of witch are there?
Oh, well, it depends who you ask because
Okay.
some people will say you're just a witch. It doesn't matter what you call. Some people are witches but don't like to be called witches.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also if you like having a label, which I like having a label for my practice because it just helps me instead of having to explain every single time what I do. If I just say I'm a hedge witch, just cuts the conversation down a bit so it's not so complicated.
Sure.
But there's maybe not hundreds, but there's definitely a lot of different type of witches because some people will say they're like a green witch who works with nature, or they're a music witch who works with music, a storm witch who works with storms, water witches who work with water, blah 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 blah. It really depends on who you ask.
Right.
So
Okay. And in terms of what a witch does when you're working with these natural influences, it's for what end? What is the purpose of it? Is
again,
it
it depends on which witch you ask.
right?
But a lot of us will do rituals to help with like abundance, good
Hmm.
luck. Some
Yeah.
witches like to do love spells or curses or hexes. I don't particularly work with baneful magic though. That's not really my thing. Some just like to get closer to nature, which is a big part of what I do. Work within liminal spaces, which are like thin places where energy is a bit weird or a bit more potent. It really really depends on which you're asking. Like it sounds like a bit of a cop out answer, but every witch is different. Like there are no two witches who are ever the same really.
Sure. Okay. I mean, you mentioned about magic there. I mean, is there magic in what a witch does?
Oh yeah, 100%. But I think what people expect the magic to be isn't what it actually is. Because I always say on like my live streams, we're not shooting fireballs out of our hands and flying. Like that's
Hmm.
just not physically possible as far as we're aware. But magic is more how I would describe a few of my friends would is it's about the manipulation of energy and working with energy to feel it and like alchemize it from one state to another.
An altogether more conventional witch story, though, concerns the lady who used to live at the cottage which once stood in these woods, on the edge of what is today Porthkerry Park. Her name was Anne Jenkins, also known as Anne the, Welsh for Black Anne. There is a fabulous old legend, either about her or at the very least inspired by her. It involved a lovesick aristocrat and his manipulative servant. The young man was naive in the ways of love. He wrote poems and letters to the objects of his desires, but she just rebuffed him. Sensing an opportunity, his servant told him of the famous witch who lived in the woods in Porthkerry, and how she could make the young man a love potion to win his girl over for a guinea, worth about £1 5p now, but a lot of money back then. He agreed and followed him into the woods. They met the witch of Porthkerry, and she made the potion and gave it to the gentleman. As gentlemen of this area would never carry money, it was always left to the servant to pay for things from his master's coffer. But seeing how old and frail the witch was, this unscrupulous man thought he'd pocket the money for himself, and refused to pay her for the potion. Angered by the deception, she cast a spell over the two of them, uttering, "May these men never leave these woods." The two men only got as far as the edge of the woods before turning into two trees. The master, tall and elegant, turned into a straight yew tree. The servant became a twisted and gnarled hornbeam tree. Both trees are still there, and ever since, the path they took from the cottage to the edge of the woods has been known as Lover's Lane.
Now, as much as this story is mostly absolute bunkum, here's the thing. There really was a lady who lived in this cottage whose name was Anne Jenkins, also known as Anne the. And there is quite a lot of testimony that she was a witch, a provider of potions and remedies. There's a written account that she was inspected for witch marks by the magistrates at Cowbridge, and that her son was also described as a wizard, and both practiced sorcery. So, was she a witch in the conventional sense? There's a lot of written testimony to say that she was, and we also have some quite interesting circumstantial evidence. Anne Jenkins lived here in the village of Porthkerry, and no more than half a mile from her cottage is the parish church of Porthkerry, and the door of the parish church may have an interesting contribution to make to this story.
Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you will know that I attribute these crude engravings to a Marian cult, which was rife in the area. Now, however, it is worth at least pointing out that there is another interpretation of these type of markings, and they are often described as witch marks, and in parts of England they are believed to act as a deterrent by warding off witches and evil spirits. Official records register Anne Jenkins as being buried here at the Church of St Nicholas in Barry, so you'd have to question if she was genuinely in league with the devil. Probably not if she was buried in the yard of a Christian church. It does, however, make me wonder if there isn't a need to do a little bit of myth-busting around witches. Let's have a look at a couple of theories. It's widely believed that in the medieval period, when the medical profession was in its infancy, doctors and physicians went to great lengths to distance themselves from the sort of healers who had traditionally provided herbs and incantations to cure people of illness or misfortune. In 1421, a petition was brought to Parliament to legislate that people needed to qualify in order to be allowed to make medicines, to prevent what they described as a great harm and slaughter to many men. Now, I've often heard it said that these men, looking to elevate their own positions of integrity, would use the term witch to describe their competition, to discredit women offering healing or medical help. Is this true? Well, it's possible, but as Anne Jenkins was around in the 19th century rather than the medieval period, I don't think it really helps us with her. It also leads to a logical point where we can do some witch myth-busting. There are, and you've alluded to it already, lots of myths and lots of preconceptions about what a witch is or what a witch can do. Let's do a quick fire. I'll give you one, and you tell me whether this is true or false or where it's come from. So I think you've kind of given us the answers to this already, but certainly in a lot of early texts, witches are described as being in league with the devil, not a million miles away from the dictionary definition. Is that a myth?
Yes, that is a myth. Like, some witches would class themselves as satanic witches, I guess. Like, I have come across witches online who say they do work like with the devil or those sort of things, but the vast majority of witches do not. We have nothing to do with the devil for the most part. Okay,
so there's myth one. Myth number two. Can you guys fly on broomsticks? This must have come up in conversation before.
Well, surprisingly, no one's actually asked this. They usually just say it as a joke on like a live stream comment. They'll be like, go and fly on your broom or something really silly. But I can say most of us wish that we could fly on brooms, because how much fun would that be?
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, that is a myth, because as far as I'm aware, flight is not possible like that.
I'm with you. Well, do you know where that came from? And I'm being a bit flippant asking the question, but I'm curious where that originated.
I have two theories on where it could have come from, and this is not necessarily my theory. It's just a very widely believed, like, the origins of it.
Yeah.
So the first one would be the pagan broom hopping ritual, which is seen in weddings, and it's where the bride and the groom jump over the broom, and it's to, like, basically symbolize their undying love and commitment to each other. But
Okay.
the other one is farmers used to do it. They would jump over their brooms in order to usher in good luck for a good harvest. So I
Ah,
think it comes from one of those, to be honest.
oh, fantastic. And what about black cats? I mean, where do they come into the equation?
Oh, well, again, I think most witches would agree. We would love a black cat if we don't have one. Cats are like my favorite animals. So I'd love a black cat. I'd love about 10. But why they come into it is because sort of just around or just before the time the witch trials were happening, black cats were getting a bit of a bad rap too. They've been considered to be evil and in league with the devil for centuries. I'm not sure why. I've never really understood it, but it's like people used to think they were evil, or like the church would think that they were evil, and so they just became synonymous with witches because of that. It was like, oh, well, if that's in league with the devil, if a cat's in league with the devil, then a witch must be in league with the devil. They must be working together, and it's just, yeah, it's all just a bit.
Maybe
It's a Christian thing.
well, as you're saying it, I'm wondering if it's got something to do with the plague and how the Black
Yes,
Death
yes.
spread, whether it was ignorance about what was causing it to spread, because rats ended up with the rap, but I wouldn't be surprised
Yeah.
if cats were part of it as well. What other common myths do you ever come across?
People always ask me about, like, ritual sacrifice, and like,
Okay.
you like goats heads or ram heads, and it's like, again, not in league with the devil,
Yeah,
so
this
we
is
don't
quite
do that.
satanic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like most of the myths come from satanic worship and things to do with that nature, but most of us just don't do that, or they think that we're all fortune tellers. We can tell your future because we use things like crystal balls and tarot, and it's like, I do use tarot and a little bit of crystal balls and even pendulums and lots of different divination things, but divination is not meant to tell the future. It's meant to be like a sort of mirror and reflection of, like, your inner psyche.
I
And
get
that's
you.
why, like, it'll really explain, like, problems that you have. And it's like, I've done so many tarot readings for people, and they always say, this really resonates with me, or this is what I'm going through, or blah blah blah. And it's like, you can almost adapt any divination method to fit into someone's situation. It's not too hard for you to identify with what's being said. But I have had some pretty accurate readings where I
Oh,
haven't
wow.
known their situation, and they've said, oh, that really fits with me. So I do think it works. I just don't think that it's meant to tell the future.
So, what have we learned? Well, we've learned about the rich tradition in Glamorgan folklore of witches. We've learned about Mastor Nor, the medieval mistress of Robert Fitzhamon, and how she charges through the skies, wreaking terror wherever she is seen. We've heard about the tradition of the Gurak Arben, this banshee-like creature who both laments the last in the line of aristocratic families, or also foretells your own impending doom should you see her. And then we've had the remarkable story of Anne Jenkins, somebody who, by the looks of it, actually was a witch and lived right here in Porthkerry. And we've heard the story of the aristocrat and the servant, and we've seen that witches aren't just a thing of the past, and we've been privileged enough to meet somebody who is carrying the torch well into the future. So I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos about legends and folklore and spooky stuff, then for heaven's sake subscribe to this channel. It won't cost you a penny, and you'll have access to loads and loads and loads of ones that I've done already, and also plenty about Welsh history too.
And if you'd like further reading about any of the subjects we've covered in this video, I cannot recommend these two books enough. Legends and Folklore of Bridgend and the Vale, and the imaginatively titled More Legends and Folklore of Barry, Bridgend and the Vale, available from Amazon, all good bookshops, or come direct to the author at grahamloveluck-edwards.com.